is February 20th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's right, because 22nd is Tuesday, and it is about quarter after 6 p.m. here in the United States East Coast. Good evening, and the Lord's blessing be upon you today. Hopefully you watched the sermon earlier. If you didn't, you need to go do that. It was a good one, but I have a lot of material, and I was thinking about saving it until tomorrow morning, but I just have a hunch the news cycle's moving too fast, and I don't want it to get lost. And people always say, "Tom, why don't you do an evening show?" And I often have commitments that keep me busy at evening, but tonight I'm not so busy, so I decided to come on here and share some of my own research I'm doing with you to explain what I'm learning and to kind of work out the history of some things, and maybe you guys will enjoy it. So this is going to be a much more loose, free-form show. I'm just going to share some things I'm working on. If you like what I'm doing, if you like the channel, you want to support the work, certainly would appreciate that. The Venmos, CVC, PRV, the super chats are enabled. I don't put any advertising on here because it would annoy you and it would annoy me. So we tried doing that and it sucked. So we stopped doing that. And P.O. Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. Okay, so now you have all that out there. So one of the things I've been obsessed with, some of you who've read my books, and if you haven't, go check them out on Amazon. The first book I wrote in the nonfiction sequence was Someone Has to Say It, The Hidden History of How America Was Lost. And it goes back to something I've been studying for a long time, going back to my time working in the Ron Paul campaign, of seeing where the Federal Reserve got its power from. And eventually you trace it back, and you get to the Bank of England, and we get to the War of the Spanish Succession. And then so we had to figure out where to get back from there. And basically I've done it. And the pathway that is has to be followed in this is you have to go backwards. Give me 1 second here. Dana just asked me to shut one light off here. So if we go back, you have to look how banking worked, and you have to remember the story of William and Mary. William and Mary coming out of the House of Hanover, and the influences that that had, as well as the wars where you had the English work alongside the Dutch, and that they had the competing between the Dutch East Indies Company and the British East Indies Company, which were really sort of two branches of the same coin. Now, just to give you an idea, and we'll use the Dutch East Indies Company because I know the numbers better on it. In the 1600s, they had a valuation in terms of their real dollars at that point in time about $9 trillion, or would have been pounds sterling, or whatever guilders, if you wanted to use that as the currency. And the point is, they had a ton of the money, and they were running together absolutely, absolute dominance in the economic sphere. And what they did was they were an entity that demonstrated that banks could own governments. And essentially, the Dutch state, which was broken off of the Spanish crown, was artificially created so that the banks could control the state. Now, where did they get an idea like that from? And where did England get the idea from? Well, if you look at the families that were married to who, and you trace back the noble lineages, where do you end up at? You end up in Venice. And Venice is interesting. Now, Venice, people don't know the history of it, but I want to share it with you. So we have to go back to 697. There were a bunch of Roman families that were very rich, very wealthy, and very powerful that decided to skedaddle as the empire had fallen apart and the whole thing was falling into pieces. And they decided they were going to go hide in a swamp. And it's a weird thing. If you start studying the history of the major banking centers of the world, you'll find, at least in the Western world, they are all built on cities in what used to be swamps. I'll give you a perfect example, and you're welcome to go look these up. I did before I came out here to make sure. Venice, swamp. You would be talking Rome, swamp. Zurich, Switzerland, swamp. Frankfurt, Germany, swamp. London, England, swamp. Amsterdam, swamp. Antwerp, swamp. And so when they say draining the swamp, they've always gone to the swamp because, I don't know, there's got to be an occultic interpretation of it. I think that's honestly what the core of it has to be. But as I've been tracing these swamps and I've been tracing these family lines, you go back to Venice and we see what happened in the Republic La Serenissima. Now, in Venice, they had something called the Council of Ten. And the Council of Ten was basically a group that was there to watch for the safety of the Republic, and anyone could make an anonymous tip to them. You could be tried, and if you couldn't prove your innocence, they would hang you by your foot, and they would hang you until you died. And this is how they dealt with people, anonymous secrets. So when you see them go around with those creepy masks, the original surveillance state was set up there. And how did they get away with it? Well, they also invented the ledger and deposit banking. So in the old days, what would happen is we lived in societies of low trust, and what they would do is they'd go to the bank, and you'd have to weigh out the actual amount of money, and people would say, oh, it's worth this much and that much, and people would carry coin. Venice changed that, and they caused a capital revolution where they were able to buy and control everything that was out there. Like, I'll give you an example, and there's a great, what was the name of the guy? Farrell is the guy. Joseph Farrell, I think, if I remember is the name. But it's definitely Farrell who wrote a book about the vipers of Venice, Venice's financial vipers, and he was talking about this. And what they basically did was they did predatory finances. Like if you look at the Fourth Crusade, the infamous Fourth Crusade. So what happened was the Pope called a crusade to retake the Holy Land. Venice took the money and said, "Yeah, we'll do that." The French needed transportation. Venice had the biggest navy, and they were the only ones who could afford the ships. "Yeah, we'll do that. We'll give you a good deal." They were supposed to go to war with Egypt. Egypt paid off the Venetians. "Oh, we won't take them there." So Venice took the Crusader fleet to take out their enemies on the Adriatic ports, and then took them to Byzantium, where they sacked Constantinople, which opened the door for Islam to come in through the back door eventually, which impoverished the Orthodoxy and set up a schism where you would forever see Orthodoxy fighting with the Western religion of the Western Church. They did the same thing again when it came to the wars between the Catholics and Protestants to a large extent, because it was literally a Venetian cardinal that was, at one hand, he was committing correspondence with Luther. I'd have to look up the name, I don't remember it. But at the same time, he was literally funding Ignatius Loyola. And if you don't know that, he's the guy who founded the Jesuits, the ones who were the key to going and persecuting the reformers during the war, the War of the Holy League and the Reformation and the War of Cambrai, where literally every country. I mean, imagine how pissed off you would have to be. Venice made so many people mad at them because of their chicanery that literally France, Germany, that's to say the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope, and Austria all went to war with Venice. It would be the equivalent if America, Russia, China, and would be another country, India, all decided to declare war on a country the size of Israel, let's say, because they got so sick of the games that were being played with them. And if you begin chasing the money down and you chase the history of it, what you find is that these ancient families, the so-called black nobility, were the ones who were actually running the show, and they have been using debt control management to take charge over nations for many, many years. And why do I say that to you now? Because what we're watching in Canada is the same thing, the same story that's been played out for now now I can trace it back at least 600 or 700 years. Okay, and one of the things that you begin to find is that the way the money operated was that they bought and traded governments. They even said they looked at nations as theoretical concepts on the map to be moved and changed at will. And we see this, happening up in Canada. We see that we don't know who these people are. I have a lot of Canadians sending me information. We have strange markings on these uniforms, and they don't think they're UN, but they think they're as paid security contractors, the same people who were used to disperse people in Australia. And at this point, it's worth noting that the kings of our government are hiring mercenaries against the peasant revolts of the people, and that we have now gotten past the age. And this is very important. You need to recognize this. This is a major change. We no longer have national armies and national militaries and national police forces that represent the interests of the people. We have elites who have control that is illegitimate, that is sponsored by the corporations and the bankers, right? And that they're using that to buy and purchase power of forces to be used to suppress their own citizenry. And we see this as the entree to the social credit score authoritarian system that they piloted in China. We can say China created it, but who built China? China 50 years ago was a backwater dump, and they purposely built it up as a testing, same as they did in the Arab countries like Dubai. And now it's coming back here. All the things that we enabled, all those Google research, all those projects that DARPA thought was so great, now we're seeing them being built upon our own people, and it's starting in Canada. Now, we have seen as that plays out that the American convoy is scheduled to start on the 23rd, and we've seen that the United States government is calling in Capitol Police, they're calling in National Guard in anticipation of this event, and I just can't see how this is going to end well, whether they try to interfere with it, and then what options do people have against this, and the only thing I can think of, to be honest with you, is that, a general strike. And by that, I mean, if everyone stays home and makes it so the country is inoperable, you can take away their power, because who wants to rule the lazy slug? And yet that's what we have to be. Watchman writes, a confirmation of UN planes landing in Canada. I did see that in North Bay, Ontario, and also a report on microwave weapon technology burning skin for disbursement. Yeah, the LRAD units, right? We've seen this being used pretty aggressively as the clearing out of Ottawa continues, and the promise has been made by the government up there that they intend to persecute the people who are involved in this for the next, 6 months potentially or more, just like they did with January 6th. They're telling the lie that the citizens of their countries are terrorists, and that the people who are completely compliant are the ones who are there, but who are good. But realistically, they've turned citizens into slaves, and it's happened pretty much overnight. I mean, they realized with COVID they could get away with it. Now, I don't know if they're doing this because they want to fight. I mean, it seems like they do, but this is the reality, and we've seen this in many countries, and we've seen it specifically throughout the English-speaking world become really bad. And let me say good evening. Good evening to Corey. Good evening to Timmy. It's like I said, 6 o'clock here. You're pretty late, Timmy, if I'm not mistaken. You're over in England, right? What is it, 11:30 almost over there? If I remember right, I think you guys are 5 hours ahead of Eastern time. So, but anyway, I was in a really good place this morning. Beyond even the sermon, I was really doing the research and beginning to connect the dots of how the control of this world was taken. And what you have to understand is, like the Rothschild family said, and by the way, don't get fixated on one family. The Rothschild family, believe it or not, are a little bit newer than some of the other families that probably have just as much sway as others, but you don't hear about them because their names got lost in history. I mean, the best way to have power is to be invisible. It's like the Chinese and their intelligence agency. They don't give it a name. And why don't they give it a name? They don't give it a name because they don't want anyone to know who they are and where they're operating, which I get. I actually respect it. It's a little bit crazy, but it's one of those things. Tom, see if you can find Watchman's Post channel when you get off. He's got some really good videos up to date in China, Ukraine, and more. Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Good to see you, Tim. Another thing, too, so let's talk about that for a moment here before we go back to it. The Ukraine situation continues to devolve. Yeah, Majestic 12, absolutely. You know, you look at how Forrestal got killed for that. The admiral who got assassinated, who was originally supposed to be in charge of that, and what they ran with on that. Absolutely true. So the Ukraine situation continues to escalate. The Biden administration had a meeting of the National Security Council, and they're still claiming Russia's invasion is imminent. Russia is moving troops into the area, and they are forward deployed in a way that is indicative of something happening. The Ukrainians continue to shell the Donbass region. Everyone seems to want this war, and why wouldn't they want the war? Because you know what? The government needs more excuses for the police powers. And whether you live in Russia, the United States, or anywhere in between, every government in their war against the people can use the war between different countries as a distraction to build their security state. They did it with World War One, putting in permanent taxation and debt-based Rothschild bank finance currencies. They did it with World War Two with the national security state, and with the Cold War, they continued to advance that. Using that as the justification, actually, for the Great Replacement that pre-wrote the Great Reset. And now we're seeing with World War III potentially on the horizon, and whether it's World War III or not, the threat of World War III is probably enough for them to claim permanent emergency conditions. Did you see that Biden today continued the COVID emergency status so that certain rules and protocols can be kept in place? Because government never gives back power to the people. People have to take back power from the government. And that's a lesson that all of us in North America, unfortunately, are going to be forced to learn one way or another. Either we will choose servitude and slavery, or the path will be different, and that will be a harder path in many ways. I'm not sure what people will pick. I'm just telling you those are the choices. This is becoming a binary choice very quickly because there's no voice for what is true in this government. I mean, look at as usual, the spineless Republicans. There was a resolution in Congress that could have been passed that the votes were there for to end mandates permanently. And what happened? 4 Republicans didn't show up. Who was it? Mitt Romney, surprise, surprise. Lindsey Graham. James Inhofe, which is the senator from Oklahoma, and then there was one other one. I don't remember them all. I should. I feel bad about that, but whatever. In any case, just enough didn't show up. What a convenient thing, And it always works that way, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, the people who are there always have those backgrounds and they have those plans and they play both sides against the middle. And realistically, you guys know this. We're Pinelanders for a reason. We know this government doesn't represent us. It doesn't represent you if you're an American, and to our Canadian Pinelanders who are out there, as well as people throughout the rest of the Anglosphere, welcome to the community as well. We know that the Prime Minister didn't stand up for you at all, and neither did the Tories. They just went ahead and backed away from it. If any of them had balls to stand with the people and really muddy the waters, things would be different. But every politician in the West is controlled, and every politician around the world is controlled. The banks have their clutches in all of these people one way or another. And how do they do that? Easy. They control you by your worst impulses, and by the fact that, to do the sort of things these people who are sociopaths want to do, they need money. And to keep the money supply going, like oxygen going to them, they agree to these things. And what do the people who have money do? They practice occult practices and take it from someone who used to do it. And you can see it as clear as day. So this is what we're dealing with. We are now dealing with the war that is clarifying to be the governments against the people. And so If America goes to war with Russia or whatever happens in this, I want everyone to remember, whatever side of that line you happen to be on, the people who are stuck there being grunts on the other side are not your enemy. The people, the ordinary people of Russia are never going to be my enemy. The people of China aren't either. Lord knows they've suffered more than anybody. The enemy is us. The enemy is our government. The enemy are the states that oppress us. And they've shown you. You saw that little old lady get trampled. If it wasn't bad enough, they didn't even apologize for it. They're like, oh, someone tried to throw a bicycle at us. You are so false, so full of it. I mean, the deceit knows no bounds, and then they just echo and support it. And the propaganda regime, my lord, the propaganda regime has gotten to the point where it's utterly absurd, and yet people must somewhere still be believing it. And I don't know how this is supposed to continue, but that's what they're doing. We have a total disconnect from reality. I mean, I guess that was inevitable. You look at some of the policies they support and promote right now, it was inevitable they would think that way. So now we see this being pushed ever harder, and the authoritarianism is being imposed upon the Canadian people. And we'll see what kind of resistance they can offer. I don't know. And I talked to a lot of Canadians today. They're demoralized, they're scared, and yet they're awakened as well. They understand the danger, they understand the threats. And when things come in, we will have an ally in those people. I mean, the cities are always going to be a problem. They always were going to be a problem. But a lot of people who weren't awake before, who didn't understand the right wing in the United States, well, now you do. And it's not as simple as left versus right, because that is another means of control. But nonetheless, it is true. There are people who understand that we do not want to be part of one state, in the sense that we don't believe that the government should have all power. We don't believe in absolute statism. We don't believe in technocratic tyranny. Hey, good to see you, Crumb. Glad you're here. We don't believe in all of these problems. The solutions will come from giving more power to the very people who caused them. It's absolutely crazy out there. Let me look. You guys are writing a lot, so let me see what y'all are writing here. Let me say hi. Hey, Tim, good to see you. Glad you're here today. Free Green, good to see you as well. Thank you for your comments. Zelensky proposed to meet Putin. Hopefully he has buckled and seen sense. I don't think Zelensky really is the one who has a choice in this. I really think, if you look at the history of the wars, the way it works, it's usually Britain persuades Eastern Europe to pick fights that are stupid and get them destroyed. What was the joke I made earlier? Britain is willing to fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian. And I say that because that's the debt financing. That's the battle. And just so you understand the geopolitics of this, it's becoming increasingly clear, as you listen and look at things. What America and Britain fear is losing Europe to the Eurasian project. If you look at it from a pure geopolitical level, that they look at Russian oil and the Chinese market as displacing what America could do, and so they have to destroy that. And if that means giving up Ukraine to keep Germany and France in the Western orbit and making Russia into a big scary boogeyman, they're going to try to do it, and they're going to use every tool in their woke toolbox to do it, using every gift of soft power, and hoping that the Russian cleaver doesn't cut through them any deeper than it needs to. Because it looks to me Russia, I don't think, wants a war. I really don't think so, but I think that they concluded there's no better option, so they're going to absorb what they want out of Ukraine. I continue to think they're going to do that. I don't see the downside of them doing it, and I don't, other than the damage they'll do to their own people, obviously. But, ultimately, NATO lies. The documents have come out about the agreement that had been made many years ago, where the NATO said they wouldn't expand further eastward, and they did. And, that's... And look, America lies a lot, and so does Britain. It's known as perfidious Albion. And it's not that they're bad people. The English people are lovely, as are the Scots and the Irish, and I know, the Welsh and all those people, and the Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, as well as Europeans. And nothing against any of these people. But their governments are horrible. And all the governments are horrible because they're all owned by the same bankers. And the bankers use governments like pieces on the board. So it doesn't... At this point, foreign policy is completely disconnected from the interest of the people of any of the countries these people live in. They're just playing with pieces of control and the toys they have. And honestly, in a responsible world, we would slap them back from it. But God knows, technology's made it impossible. We don't organize, we don't connect, and when people try to go out there, all they do is they threaten them. And so you have to recognize that the rule of law is done. We now live in the mercenary state, and Canada started it. We are now back before 1648. So here's what happened before 1648, before the bankers realized having the state was a means of easier control, because then they could manage all the debt financing through singular sources. No, the black nobility is very real. Absolutely. We were talking about that, Mekong. what we now have is that we need to organize ourselves, and that means in your community. That means that you got a sheriff, you got a posse, you got a militia, whatever you got. And I'm not telling you it doesn't really matter what it is. You need a means of collective self-defense against the imposition of the state, and to recognize that their sovereignty decreasingly must apply to you unless you want to live under complete tyranny. Now, they'll be able to impose it on their hive cities. God knows they'll probably like it and be, yay, this is great. I never have to think about anything ever again. Let's go get the evil people in the countryside. And that's where this is going to go. And so if you're a rural person, we have to begin our separation now. And if you haven't been doing it physically with your preps and your awareness, you need to start doing so with incredible haste, because what has started in Canada will become a trend in other countries. And you notice no one's condemning Trudeau. I mean, if Trump was still in there, as much of a piece of crap as he was in many ways, I bet you he would have actually gone ahead and condemned him. Not a single person. The only person who's made a comment about the crackdowns in Canada is the damn Chinese ambassador. I mean, would you imagine that? China's lecturing Canada on how to run things. I mean, I guess that's what they've been doing for a very long time with a whole bunch of other things. But now they're actually doing it with how they run their human rights program. And that's what it is. And it's just, it's disgusting to me. And, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think we've gotten to the point where it's not going to be long. If this trucker convoy in America goes belly up, that people are going to have to make decisions a very different way. And I'm not threatening anything. I'm not trying to instigate anything. I'm just telling you as a historian, this is what's going to happen, because people have had enough of this crap. And all they really wanted, God knows, all they wanted is to be left alone, And I don't think that's good enough. You know that. I've been a dissident a long time, and I've seen how that goes. Herding cats isn't fun the libertarian way. But nonetheless, at some point, tyranny becomes so egregious that people have no choice but to push back on it. But when we look at it and we begin to understand the depth of this, we begin to understand these games that they're playing are not ones that they've made in the last generation or the last year. It's a different flavor of the same damn song of our elites have been pushing on us for now, I can say, at least 700 years. And I'm not done going backwards. I'm sure if I studied my history of Rome and what the Phoenicians were doing, I would figure that out too. And that we would be looking at the same basic scam that was being run, where we have this hustle where fake money gets real wars into real problems and takes real assets from real people. And that we need to stop that. So, at some point, we need to break the bank. We need to break the World Economic Forum. Now, I'll tell you right now, if you are Canadian, not that it's much, but if you need to get across the border and you need a place to stay for a day or two, you're certainly welcome to come visit Dana and me. I would do that. And the wife and I talked about that, and we would gladly help if it comes to that. But I will tell you this, in honesty, if things go the way I suspect they're going to go in the coming months, that border's not going to mean anything. The American and Canadian patriots, I believe, will be corresponding and linking up with one another. And what emerges on the other side of this will be different. We might be Germany and you might be Austria, but at the end of the day, we're all speaking the same language, if you get what I'm saying. And we need something different. And we need to look at a world that, if we're really honest, the Chinese people aren't going to be able to offer resistance. Russia, for as much as I like certain things in their orthodoxy, has their own totalitarianisms. And what's happening in Europe is not good. And I hope, and I have some optimism, that the European people will push back on that and change things. But on the other hand, the EU has always been an elite-run project for a very long time. There's not a lot of weapons there. And with the rise of technology, it would be different to fight that. So for the Australians and New Zealanders, you shouldn't have given up your guns. I don't know what to tell you. I hope that that's something you can push past. But here in America and in Canada as well, because we can't afford to have Canada be a hostile communist nation, Lord knows, I mean, why we're in the Red Dawn timeline, I don't know. But we are going to have to figure out answers together, and whatever that looks like on the other side of it looks like. I suspect it'll be much more localized. Maybe it'll be something that's a major confederation of everyone, and that the power will be devolved to the local areas, because that's what it's going to have to be. But right now, we need to find allies and friends on the map, and that's what we're looking at. I mean, the coming civil war is imminent. There's no other way to put it, because they're not going to allow any other option. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets. The more people replace, the less resources they have. And it's a shame, because this was not necessary. The mandates were opening up. There were opportunities for things to go differently, but they don't want that. They've never wanted that, and they don't. They want to control you. The people in charge want actually they want to get rid of you. If you don't do what they want to turn you into an object. They're not content with having subjects anymore. We've literally reached the point where elites want people to be objects, and they treat us like objects. We can be poked and prodded at will. And now people have decided, in defense of bodily sovereignty, which is what the heart of this comes down to in the end, and that the ability to have these choices, we will have to offer resistance to it. And so the steps are, like I was saying, and like I'm going to try to write about if civilization doesn't collapse before I get to it. Nonviolent insurrection. And what is nonviolent insurrection? In the simplest form, it's economic warfare. The only thing you can do is you can stop that money from flowing and break the system such that the people who are serving as their dupes and doing their dirty work can no longer exist within it. They need us more than we need them. But for us to win, it's very simple. We just have to stay home. We have to not participate. And look, the convoys are good because they spread awareness and they demonstrate to people. They wake people up to the risks involved. But the reality of it, victory doesn't come from fighting them in the streets. It's just going to get more people thrown in jail. But as the injustices build, the willingness of people to stand against what's actually being there and being done will rise. The Constitution's a fine document in a lot of ways if you actually followed it and you dumped all the federal code that was on top of it. It's a workable form of government. It's not my favorite. I'm not that fond of it for certain reasons. I'm going to be very honest about that. I'm a separatist. I said that, and New England. If I'm in charge, we're going our own way, and we'll take the Great Lakes with us. The Dixie can rise again, and the Westerners can figure it out for themselves. But we can be friends, and we should be friends, and we should defend one another. Much like NATO. What would it be? I guess it'd be North American Treaty Organization. Whatever. We'd come with some new thing that'd be better to take care of each other, not because we want to have wars around the world, but just simple defense of the continent. Good to see you, Lamprey. Glad you're here. You're always late. But we were talking about the issues that are happening out there, and my basic observation is that the war of the elites upon the people is real. It's going forward with incredible speed, and I've been watching the videos out of Canada. I'm watching the frustration, and I don't know really what else commentary wise can be added to that, other than that I would just say that if we can figure a way, Lord knows I'd love to do this. We have so many talented people. If we could find a way to just pick a place, squat on it, and grab it, and say that, that's going to be our home. This is something we could do. Well, Lamprey, I tell you what, I'm glad you're having a blessed Sunday. If you want to watch a hot sermon, why don't you watch what I did this morning? I think you'll like it a lot better. And frankly, I think you might walk away from that with a different view of your theology, because I know where you're coming from. I know why you're there. But you know what? You're a good man. It's time for you to step up and follow what the Lord wants for you, and just pray on it. It isn't my job to tell you. You make your own decisions. You're a grown man, and everyone here is going to make their own decisions. We now live in a world with consequences, and whether it be your theological purposes, whether or not you've accepted the Lord Jesus Christ, which you need to work on if you haven't, or whether it's going to be how you survive day to day, and you need friends. You can't make it through a time like this alone. When civil unrest comes, if you're the one thumb sticking out in the community, they're going to grab you. Unless you are completely hidden off grid, and believe me, you're probably not as hidden as you think you are, they're going to come grab you. And so you need friends, and you need to have conversations. You need to be talking now while you still can, and say, hey, when things get funny, you got my back, and you need to know where someone stands and know how you can stand with them. And that's the conversation now. That's where we're at. And then as we go through this, remember, our government is a bought and controlled entity of the corporate class. That is a bought and controlled entity of things like BlackRock, of Vanguard, of the same Venetian banker family to go all the way back, and they're the royal families of Europe and all those things. It's no accident that the Bilderberg Group always holds their things in the Netherlands, with the Queen of the Netherlands, an artificial construct of the Dutch East India Company that was the move of the Venetian trading firms that literally made their money of wars off the original Crusades. Sounds like those wandering things to the Middle East, right, that we did. The game has not changed. I mean, literally, if you want a biblical definition, go look at Daniel 7 and what the first beast of the apocalypse he saw was. It was a winged lion. And then go look at the frescoes in Venice. You can actually see this. This is what I'm literally chasing. I'm trying to figure out exactly what that last beast is. But I tell you what, you can literally chase the people who brought banking to Venice. This is the interesting thing Pharaoh was covering. You literally can trace it back to Babylonian exiles that were brought through Rome to Venice. So if you want to know where Mystery Babylon is, and you want to trace the bloodlines, I can tell you exactly where it goes. Babylon to Phoenicia to Rome to Venice to Amsterdam to London to America, and here they are in New York City. same as they've ever been. And they've kept different places. You can see where the obelisks are. It's no secret. Those are the conquered places. And it's west. It's the west. And it disturbs me deeply. I mean, if you want to know what countries that are hitting this, obviously the Anglosphere countries, but the countries of Western Europe are part of this. Did you know Prince Henry the Navigator, the Portuguese guy, who funded him? Well, it was the Templars who gave him the money to find a way around Africa. And once they did that, what happened? They gave the thing over to the Dutch because they used them as the force. And then once they were disposed, they went ahead and they took the trading money because they never wanted that. They wanted the money. And this is, I mean, even the way Venice got rich, you know what they did? In China, silver was valuable, gold was not. In Europe, gold was valuable, silver was not, relatively speaking. And so what they did was they had these, the arbitrage between them. That's why Marco Polo was going back and forth to China. He's like, oh, I'll give you all this silver. What will we take? Oh, I guess we'll take some of that worthless gold. And then you come back to Europe. Oh, we're worthless silver that they grabbed from actually the slaves in the mines in Peru, if you really want to know where they got it from, and that the Spaniards grabbed and took out for them, and that the English then raided. They raided their own commerce, right? And they took this money out of there, and then they gave it to the Chinese, and that's how. And then they destroyed any competition. They destroyed the Florentine banks. They destroyed anyone who stood against them, and they sat there in the swamp. I mean, hell, if you really want to go into it, I honestly believe it. I'm not even joking about this. You look at who handled trade in Europe from about the 10th century onward. It's Genoa and Venice. How can you imagine that if you were the ones trading from places to places? You hear about the British with their blankets they gave to the Iroquois. How about the Venetians in the boxes they put with the rats and the fleas in them? You want to know where your Black Plague went from? It probably was a form of economic warfare. And you say, how can you say things so horrible as that? Because the people who've been in charge are the same horrible bastards going back nearly a millennia. This is literally the history you're not allowed to hear. Oh, this is a conspiracy. No one respectable says this. No one respectable says that because to get paid by them, you have to tell lies. And these are the truths. Bavaria. Okay, you want to talk about Bavaria. The same families, if you want to go back to come out of Venice, they went ahead and supported the Hohenzollerns into Bavaria, the House of Hanover as well, into there, and as well as Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. You trace all the families. The same damn money that funded the Weishaupt and the Illuminati funded the British. And people say, oh, he's a schizo. And that's okay. I want them to think I'm a schizo. If I'm crazy and say enough crazy things, I get to speak truth because he's a crazy guy. You can't believe anything he says. This is more truth than you can handle. Not you guys. You guys can handle it, but you know what I mean. This is where we're at. And let's see what we have here. Yeah. The priest and the Levite just walked by the guy who beat up in the alley and the Good Samaritan. The elites want to sit on the throne of the Most High, who dwelleth on thy throne. You're right. They do want to sit on his throne. You know what? Bad news for you. Jesus wins in the end. What happened in 1776? You want to know what happened? The Masons got control of America. That's what happened. They chose to build a swamp. If you knew the history of New England better, this is how I found this. When you look at New England, it was literally people like Masons and Jesuits that were funding Indians, and they were leading them to fight the colonists because the as usual, the crown was afraid of the people being free. They were afraid of Quebec for the Quebecois. They did it, the horrible expulsion of the Acadians, and they went after the people in New England. I mean, and yeah, they fought each other, and it's complicated. But you begin to see that if you read the writings and the letters of the people, well, they knew what they were fighting against. They were fighting against the tyranny that would be imposed by certain groups who were being paid by bankers. And remember, when they were protesting in Boston Harbor, who was it? It was the corporations. The woke corporation at the time was, you must buy the tea from the British East India Company. You can screw over the crown, but you better not screw over the bank. And you know what? Now the bank has done the hostile takeover. Our governments need to be seen as fully owned corporate subsidiaries of the international banking establishment as mediated by the World Economic Forum. They've been in there for 15 years doing this. They're funding every step of the way. They use COVID to get control of every major company, shut down every small company, and not allow different options. Yeah, Wesley Clark talked about it, the 7 countries they were going to take out, right? I remember all that, absolutely. So you have to understand that this is the world you're now living in, and the world looks a lot more like the 17th century. And if you want to, actually, if you really want to have a good topic to study, you might want to study the wars that happened between the little states and the Guelphs and the Ghibellines in Renaissance Italy, and you might want to take a look at what happened in the 30 Years' War in between Germany, where you had Protestants fighting against Catholics, princes against princes, interventions by foreign powers, and all these things, because now there is no recognized authority. They have surrendered their legal authority. I mean, if you're a Canadian, do you think your government has legitimacy at any point? And we already know Biden doesn't. I mean, they have to lie and say his approval rating is 40%. He'd be lucky if it's 14%. But this is where we are in the story now, and I mean, it's tragic. And I don't know how it hasn't succumbed to violence yet, except for the fact that trains are still running, as they say. And for the moment, people are holding up. It's winter, but when summer comes, that's not going to be the case. It can't be. And so they need a distraction. And literally, the domestic situation is so bad in Western countries at this point that they look at world war as a relief. You know, so we're going to see. Um, I don't know what else to tell you guys. I mean, it has been fascinating. I'm learning a whole lot these days. I want to thank you for those of you who are supporting us through the Venmo, CVC, PRV. You're allowing me to do the research. I mean, actually, I'd love to put up a book list, frankly, of the things I'd like to read to go forward. But I mean, I had this crazy idea, and I wanted to talk to someone about. It. I was like, we have the people to make a human intelligence network that'd be amazing. We did it with CV Central, and it was very good, but I could like direct it, but I can't organize it. Maybe I have to figure a way to find the right people and the right resources and the right funding because the people need something that's going to speak to them, that's going to begin pulling us out of this. We have to begin our process of detaching. And, as I was giving a sermon today and I was talking about what the true church looks like, the true church are Christians who don't invest in a world that hates them. And this world hates us. And, if we fight to save ourselves, that's fine. But if we fight to save our countries, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Our countries will be destroyed either way, and so will we. And it's not because I fear death or I fear fighting or even that I fear killing, and that's not it. It's that you're fighting for the wrong cause. We need to be fighting to get out of these countries. You need to be fighting against the bank, and we need to be fighting against our own nature. And these are the battles that are there, and we are not morally or mentally ready for the fight that's ahead of us. We have not repented, and we need to start having the conversation. If we're going to actually rise to the level of standing against all the wickedness that's been done to us, we don't need to be looking for the broadest coalition of people who would be happy to join us. This ain't about that at that point. Democracy's out the damn window. This isn't a 50% plus one situation. This is about what are the things that are so intolerable we can't stand for anymore, and that some of us are willing to pay every price for it. And I tell you what, the idolatry and offense against God is where I start that story. The fact that we are now seeing our families torn apart by every dysgenic governmental policy you can imagine, that's another good point. The fact that you've literally violated and desecrated every bit of our history and decency, those are other good things. So all of these things are going to come together, and you did it. You caused these things. No one oppressed you. No one said you couldn't participate or you couldn't be involved. No one will look at America and say they didn't try too hard. They didn't try hard enough to integrate people who weren't like them. It wasn't like that. It was indoctrination. It was propaganda. It was idiocy, and it was secular humanism. It was all of these things that were so ugly and so difficult. And I'll tell you what the answer is. It's not more government. It's not bigger government. It's going to be that we need to be decent folk who stand for decent things. And I tell you what, I'm a believer in Christian nationalism. I am, and I know that that's a term they like to toss around. But you know what? I put Christ at the center of things, and I want my people who are around me to be people who profess and believe, because that's what I trust. I don't trust someone whose faith is arbitrary, or who says that your beliefs don't matter. Don't believe any of the petty totalitarianisms, whether they be right wing or left wing. I don't believe in the governments of this world because I know how quickly they're bought out and corrupt. But for my brothers and sisters in a crusade, I'll stand with you. I'll stand with you. Hell, if no one else will do it, I'll lead you. I don't care. What do I got to lose? I'm an old man. I got a cool beard. Cool beard and few teeth, if that's what it came to. But it has to be for the right reasons. And we now need to begin articulating those grievances, like our Canadian brothers and sisters did. But they had a good instinct. They showed a lot of bravery. And they tried to be decent. And Canadians, by and large, are the most decent and polite and civil people in the world. They really are. And they were completely rejected. Okay. The Canadians tried to do it the nice way. Americans are not as... Well, actually, it's not true. Americans are very nice people. But we don't have delusions down here because we've watched the evil our governments perpetrate on us and around the world for a very long time. They are not the good guys. They are not the heroes. The good guys left because they didn't get the jab. That's the truth. They were purged, and we let it happen. We encouraged it to happen because the World Economic Forum controlled both sides. Okay. Now we stand together, and we'll see what comes on the other side of it. If you believe in the Lord, the beautiful thing is whatever comes in between, in the end you get to go home, if you really believe. And the one thing you learn in reading the Bible is God did not fear wars. God instructed his people, in fact, to genocide people at multiple times for offending him. Not endorsing it here. I'm just saying that's better biblical reality. People gloss over that because they're like, oh, I don't want to tell the story that way. Well, that's the Bible. Bible's a complicated book. And this wasn't one of those things where, people did it and God punished them. No, God said to do it. He said, go into Canaan and clear them out. And if you leave any of them behind, God is my witness, you will regret it. And they did. Because they were yoked with people who weren't like them. Because they were displeasing to God. And why were they displeasing to God? Because they were abominations. They took something that was beautiful, that was made in the image of a creator, and they've destroyed it. We have people now in charge who think that way, who embrace degeneracy, who embrace abominations, who embrace these genetic alterations. They always say, it's designed to help people with Alzheimer's. Everything's designed to help people with Alzheimer's. No, it's not. Stop lying. We get that you're afraid of death and you want to upload yourself into a machine, but I got bad news for you. It's time we kick some of these tin cans down the road. That's what I think. You have no soul if you make that choice. And it's a tragedy. We shouldn't want that for anyone. We shouldn't have a society that's fallen so far that's even a choice. But this is where we are. This is reality, man. And I'm just talking. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm not. If I get active, you'll know. You won't have to go looking. It's not like I didn't make a lot of friends in all the years I've talked and been around every dissident from here to Kingdom Come. From here to Kalamazoo to Timbuktu and back. And look, the reality is people who don't see the world the same way, but who do understand there's this common threat, can work together with an understanding that when it's done, we part in amity. You take what's yours, we take what's ours. But the one thing I want to tell people, and people never are ready to hear this, is the old ways dead. We're not fighting to restore the Constitution. We're fighting for the survival of our species. It's a battle that transcends political lines. We're fighting to be a people that can worship God still, that even have that choice. We're fighting to be a people who enjoy natural law and liberty, that we are allowed to make decisions. We're fighting for the right to have freedom of thought, because that's being taken from us. Economically, we're being destroyed for not being compliant. And you know what? I don't want to be compliant. I don't want to live in the world you're going to offer. You can try to pay me off. And look, I'm a cheap date. Give us the Northeast. Or give us somewhere, wherever it is, it's half decent. There's a lot of land here. 20% of us, 30% of us, whatever. And we probably shouldn't take the deal. If I'm really honest, we shouldn't take the deal, because we'd just be dealing with these liars within a generation anyway, and all their machines. But we would take the deal, because we value life more than you do. You've made abundantly clear you don't value life. Your leadership says humans are a parasite, and I hope I'm reborn as a virus. Don't believe me? Go look at what's his name. Rothschild said that. Jacob Rothschild. That's what your leadership says. That's what your bankers say. And they look at you that way, and you're like, oh, this is so exciting. We accept everything. How naive. How foolish. And yet, as angry as I get, if I'm honest, I have to admit we enabled this every step of the way. We looked the other way every time we saw something wrong because we didn't want to cause the problem. How many times did you see something in your life? You're walking around, you see something that's just abominable. Instead of saying something, you just averted your eyes or said, not my problem, not my problem. Well, guess what? Now it's all of our problems. And if we're going to have to solve a problem, we should at least solve the problem, because there's nothing worse. It's like the original Lord of the Rings, obviously the books were better, but the movies were actually well done, in my opinion. And, they fight this war to stop Sauron the first time, and they don't throw the ring away. No, and say, oh, it's okay, we'll accept wokeism. We just thought you went too far. We have to toss the whole damn thing out. Gotta do it. Gotta start over. And do I think we'll get a chance to? To be honest, no, I don't. I think we're in the end times. I think this is tribulation. That's why I think we as Christians should depart from this thing. But we probably won't be given the choice. Okay. Raise a banner for Christ. Live your life close to God as you can. And if you can help people and do smart things, do things like Free Green's doing, up there in Canada, where living off the land, absolutely great. Need to do that, and considering your community and bringing people in who have something and who are willing to contribute. And as I say to these people all the time, it's not just good enough to have people who are good and want to work together, who seem nice. I did that. That's how I ended up nearly homeless. You need people who understand, who really see the depth of the battle before us. You need to understand this is a battle of good versus evil. And you need to declare your side, and you can't be shy about it. You can't be ashamed, and you can't be afraid. And I'm telling you, there's nothing to be afraid of. You think things get worse after this world ends? It gets easier, as long as you profess the Lord Jesus Christ. This is the testing ground, ladies and gentlemen. Can we come through it intact? Well, I know what the Lord says to me about how to do it, because I read it, quite frequently. I read it this day, and it was just simple. Love God, follow His rules, and love each other. That's what He said. He didn't say love each other and then ignore God. Can't ignore God. Then God will ignore you. And if God ignores you, what happens? If you're at odds with eternity, how do you think that happens, That's zero. That's emptiness. But this is not going to happen in a good and organized way. A mistake will be made. A position will be defended. A problem will be compounded. That's how the war with Ukraine will spiral out of control if the Russians in Ukraine gets to it. That's how a civil war happens in the United States. Protesters, a cop fires, someone fires back. Boston Massacre, 1770. Except it's not going to take 5 or 6 years for things to blow their top like it did to Concord and Lexington. It's going to take about 5 or 6 minutes. Sheriffs will declare posses downtown. You can see. And who's going to listen to the jackboots, At this point, if you're federal law enforcement, people can't even believe it. In Canada, I'm looking at this. They got mercenaries up there. That's what they got to be. They got to be mercenaries. And you know what? Okay. Citizens will fight against mercenaries, and citizens will win that battle. And there will be areas where the government will lose control. There'll be whole states, really. But, outside of their small cities, what are you going to do? People are playing nice with the trucks. What happens when the bridges get cut? That's what will happen. Like I said, not promoting anything. I'm just saying simple reality. Anyone who's studied any warfare, all the people who are supporting this horrible government in all these countries live in little clusters, counting on the very people they so loathe and hate to take care of them. And if we were smarter, we're not, but if we were, and if we were more smart and less decent, we would just stay home. And we would realize that's the quickest way to get what we want. We can hold it hostage. We can lock ourselves in the cabin of the big rig, the 18-wheeler, and say, hey, I'm not driving until you do this. Or I'm just going to keep driving. Like, we're going to go off the bridge. Hey, at least we'll go off together, because you're going to do that to me anyway. And look, they are willing. And if you've learned nothing else from studying the way communists, collectivists, utopian socialists, all these people think, they're willing to kill as many people as they need of you to prove that their system is correct. And it doesn't matter how many times it's wrong. They have a love affair with a fantasy that's rooted in lies, and they can't get themselves out of it. They're obsessed with the idea of equality. The only equality that's ever been recognized in any part of human history is that everyone has gone into impoverishment, suffering, and death. Because who's going to work to make someone else rich if they don't get benefit? And equity means everyone gets a fair share, but everyone has to contribute something. And you know what? We have a lot of people who don't contribute anything that would be useful for our long-term survival. And it's not making fun of the sick or the widows or the elderly, but these are people who are self-righteous in their own, I don't know what you'd call them, in their indolence. And they don't add anything to it. And that we create more and more of these. And they're not all poor people. There can be plenty of people who are white-collar, who make 6-figure, 7-figure incomes, and just put out terrible ideas. And we've gotten too far from the land. And we've gotten too far from the Lord. And we've gotten too far from our families. And we need to reclaim those things. And as we reclaim those things, We cannot say no when they tell us we can't do that anymore. God, I look haggard and old these days. Oh, man. But that's okay. These are the battles ahead of you guys, and I'm just telling you, we're not far from them. And pray they come, by the way. The alternative's worse. If we wait and stay, all that'll happen is we'll be pushed onto more and more reservations, be allowed to do less and less things. And we've seen. I mean, it's no accident that. Would you remember when things got funny in Canada? When the Detroit manufacturers were upset, when the Biden administration was consulted. You want to know who came up with the plan for what Trudeau did? World Economic Forum gave him the impetus. But it was the American administration that put this down. And I wouldn't be surprised in the least if America's paying for some of those forces that are there, you know? I've heard stories, some of them weren't even speaking English or French, and I want to know what language they were speaking. I don't know. Intel from the ground, as always, is very difficult to tell. So we'll see. But this is the real world, and this is the news no one else will tell you, you know, and it's, I try to share it with you while I still can, because there are people who listen, some people who have influence, some people who just have a good mind in their head, and these are the battles we got to be ready for, so I just pray and hope each of you are ready. It's a good verse, John 16:33. I'm so bad at remembering from first, but I know that section of John is the part where Christ really talks about the purpose for which he came down and he suffered for us, and it said that there would be hope for us. And there is hope for us. There is always hope. But it's not in America, and it's not in Canada, and it's not in the UK or Australia, New Zealand, Germany, France, Russia, China, whatever country. It's in each other. It's in the universal church of Christian believers. And there are a lot of people in America, having spent time in terrible wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. If insurgency warfare comes to the United States, there's no lack of people who understand. It's only a question if there'll be anything left by the time we're done. I have no doubt of that. Because there's no organization. And they won't be able to stop it. They won't be able to put this cap back in the... And to their credit, to some extent, they've been more patient here because everyone recognizes the consequences. But after what was done in Canada, I mean, look, you can't mess with the hat. Can't mess with the hat. You messed with the hat. You flip a guy's hat off, Canada's our hat. Now we got to do something. So that's where we are. And that's what next week's story is going to be. Let's see what happens. The convoy launches on Wednesday. Do they try to proactively stop it? They probably should. That's what I would do if I was the bad guy. You don't let them get started, because if you let them get started, it becomes a bigger issue. Let it stay in California. Let it stay where you have your allies, where you have, you know, Gavin, another World Economic Forum protege, and don't let him escape past Barstow. Not that that stops everybody, but hey, you know, California's friendly ground. There's a lot of places in the center of the country where people look at things a little differently, a little more wholesome, I'd argue. Russia's using the guerrillas on Ukraine right now. Yeah, both sides are. I know the Ukrainians brought in a ton of people from that, and the Russians brought in their Chechens. There's like 1.5 million Chinese living in Canada already. Yeah. Well, I mean, real Canada, like real America, doesn't exist in Vancouver, Toronto, you know, Montreal. It doesn't exist in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. I'm sorry. It exists in the places where people didn't sign up for the system and they stayed out of it. Not that there aren't decent people in those places. Plenty of decent people. My mother was a New Yorker. I get it. But if you're in one of those places, it's time to get out, man. Those are going to be the places where all is going to happen. It's just going to be a mass sacrifice. And ultimately, it's worth remembering the elites did this. Whether it's the war they get with the Russians or whether it's the war they pick with the people, they chose this path. And the people, I mean, they would have got what they wanted anyway, but there's no patience because there's no decency and there's no dignity. And that's where we're at. So I wish we could all be together. I wish there was a way that I could say, let's all go to this place. But the problem is no one can do anything until it's too bad to do anything at all. And this is the horrible contradiction that I've been watching now for a while. 12, 13 years, even since I worked for Ron Paul back in 07. I mean, in bits and pieces. And sometimes we can distract ourselves. You know. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you have more all right, is there anyone here who sees a happy ending? Do you think that things work out good? Anybody? I mean, if you do, let me know. Maybe I would love to be dissuaded. I will give anyone the option to persuade me otherwise. I'm sure there's a couple people sitting in this chat because I know some people watch me who hate me. I mean, why would you watch something you hate? I don't do that. God, you suck. You're that bored in your marriage? Ugh, go do something else. You know? Probably not really married. Um. So anyway, where do I want to close? Every war makes every other. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Every war makes every other war worse, and the chaos and catastrophe that's coming is causing a system cascade failure where our ability to exist in what we used to see it, and you can see it in inflation, you can see it in supply shortages, pick whatever metric makes you happy. It's obvious. You can even see it in the psychology. People are beat and they're ready for something else. So the question we need to start asking, and what we'll ask as Pinelanders, and who knows, maybe I'll throw up the ensign for Pineland because I'm not afraid to lead into a new future. What are we fighting for? I'll tell you my answer. I've said it. I've been consistent about this for quite a while. I'm fighting for my faith. I'm fighting for my folk. I'm fighting for my family. And on a fourth one, I'm fighting for my fowl, because Lord knows you didn't touch my chickens. Vengeance is mine, said the Lord. And you know what? Christians must begin fighting for one another, and we must stop fighting and allowing ourselves to be used by systems that hate us. For too long, we have given our labor, our love, our support to a world system that, we were never meant to do. And once upon a time, maybe we could have persuaded ourselves that this was a good and godly place. Once upon a time, it was. At least most of the people were. You'll never convince me the government wasn't. I mean, just riddles with Masonic sort of left path, right path, choices, and the fact that they got the faith out of it from the beginning was disgusting to me. Because I've learned things. And one of my favorite quotes in history was from Harry Truman, who not the biggest fan of, but he said the only new thing you ever learn is the history you didn't know. I share some of that with you so you know that these same elites, you're not really fighting your government. You're fighting the people who control your government. And when things begin changing, remember who the enemy is. That's what you have to remember. You're not fighting District 1 isn't fighting District 2. You're fighting President Snow, right? And then who is President Snow? Well, it's no accident the person who screwed him is named Alma Coin, right? All my coin. That's literally what they did. They're so obvious about it. It's so blatant. It's in your face. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. All my coin. And it's an occult ritual. It's a numbers trick. But hopefully we'll come up with something better. And I don't know. I want to ask a question to you guys. I'm going to talk about what I like to talk about anyway, but where would you like me to take the channel? I know a lot of things, and I have a lot of talents, and, I live off your support, believe it or not. I actually managed to make this work between this and the royalties, so you tell me. You can tell all the things you want. I know Tim likes when I talk about transhumanism, and believe me, I'm following that, because I'm sure the robot hordes are coming forward with this, and who knows, all these people who are being jabbed, who have this in their system, what vulnerabilities do they have? Do they know? They don't. We won't know until it's too late. Let's pray it's nothing and them just being paranoid. Be good to just be paranoid for once. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the Lord because that's more important than any of this. But where do we want to go? Do we want to try to build? Do people want to try to build community together? You want to try to get real resources and do what the Bible says? Like I was reading in Acts 2-4 this morning. All get to one place, gather, and then protect one another? Do we want to try to use our wisdom to save the people who are out there and say, if we're going to be fighting, we're fighting for this? I'm talking to people who are organizers all the time saying, if you do this, it's not going to work, using every bit of skills I have as a planner to do that. Can cover more news, but the history I love. And I'll come back on your show, Lamprey, too, because we do history deep dives. You ask good questions. You're a good interviewer. And he's a good show. Migtail Chats is worth listening to. He has some good guests. Some of them, need a broader perspective that comes with time, but hey, they're right. The way men exist in today, they get screwed, and by the way, so do women, but in different ways, and it's the same people in charge who are guys. Men and women shouldn't be at war with each other. It's crazy that we are. Just one more division. And we need to begin healing certain divisions. Families can't be at war against one another. It doesn't work well. But we're going to be for a while, because that's what Civil War is all about. It's decidedly uncivil. But, yeah, I mean, in this video, at the end of it, as we draw to this, what you want me to talk about, put in there. And I will, to the best of my ability, offer knowledge and offer insight and, try to offer something that's useful to help keep you safe. If I'm honest, I feel guilty I can't do more, but, man, what can you do now? The problem is nobody can do anything until everyone does everything, and then it's too late. And it's ugly, and it's the only word for it's demonic, it's satanic. It's chaos. And they want order out of chaos. That's what the New World Order's always brought, order ab chaos. Their stupid seal's been on the dollar from the very beginning. We were the wedge that could reshape the world. The swamps of Venice weren't big enough. The swamps of Amsterdam weren't big enough. The swamps of London weren't big enough. The swamps of America, well, now they're going to try. And I take comfort in knowing that the Lord Jesus wins in the end, no matter what they try. That we can face the dragon, and we can face the bear, and we can face all of these animals. We can face the whole damn zoo. As long as we have soul, and we trust our Lord to protect us. So I just close with that. The Heavenly Father, I just pray protection over all of us, and that we find a way to speak your word, do things that are pleasing to you, and serve your will, and serve one another in this fallen time. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. The battle's been going on as long as human history, but it's a battle against our own nature, against this idea that greed and governance is a substitute for genuine concern and community. Until it kicks off, live the word, reinforce yourself and those around you by doing so. Once it does, help who you can, do what you must. Pray, repent, forgive. But whatever you do, this ain't the day to blaspheme our Lord and Savior. So get good with Jesus. I think that's all I got for you guys tonight. Thank you for being here. Yeah, free green, not a problem, man. I'll talk to you over on Telegram. Reminders, Telegram, t.me/Atlantic Homeland. If you're not there, what are you waiting for? We purged most of the annoying people who just had one thing to say. Have you ever heard about what happened in 1933? I mean, dear Lord, yes, we've all heard about it at this point. We know. Okay. The Venmo CVC PRV. I'm going to keep the programs going. And I'm trying to do some more content, go on more shows, do things. I mean, I'm pretty tired, but I'm doing what I can to help out. And I'd like to get to writing. We'll see if it happens. I just don't know if there's time. I mean, I should do it, but I mean, I honestly go through each week, day by day, wondering if we're going to get through that week. And people say, oh, you don't really mean it. Oh, I do mean it. The reason I scare you is because I mean it. Because the odds of any given day of things falling apart might only be 5%. But if your odds are 5% and you go 20 days, your odds get to 100% pretty quickly. See what I'm saying? And the people in charge, they don't know what they're doing. But the people who are running them, they do. And they're running them right into the ground. So just be smart, be safe. Go read some history, learn things, be smart. Yeah, they do use our appetites against us. You're absolutely right. I agree with that. And if you start to, I mean, the occultism behind it's absolutely fascinating, to be honest with you. But something to remember, and I always say this to people, and look, there's a lot of people here who know a lot of things we aren't meant to know. The Bible was made simple so anyone could understand it, because the purpose is to have faith and trust in God, and to have a faith that everyone can understand that is simple. The devil always offers complex solutions and secret knowledge. Truth isn't secret or hidden. It isn't need to be hidden in 20 different things. Truth is self-evident and plain. And we need to be able to speak that way. And when people say to you, do you believe this? Have the courage. Start your battle with the moral courage to say no. Someone says to you, do you support this? No. What do you mean you don't support this? I mean, no. You think it's bad? Are you judgmental? Yes. Well, how do you judge? And then you say, God said so. Oh, you're a bigot. I'm a Christian. I don't apologize for my Lord. I proclaim him. Do you see the difference? Have some courage. Have some character. Live your faith. God bless each and every one of you. Pinelander out.